Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Gambling Did You Know session. We're going to jump right in today. We're talking about the barriers, or some barriers at least, to good decision making when it comes to gambling. Now, really, if you have found this video and you're not maybe a gambler yourself, I think these can still apply to our everyday life. A lot of these barriers are things that many of us deal with, and it's not necessarily just related to gambling. So if you did find this video and you are, again, not a gambler, that's okay. You can still kind of potentially learn something from this discussion that we're going to have here today. So, if we really think about it, most of us know, at a certain point in our lives, we know kind of the best ways to make decisions and solve problems, right? That's kind of a skill that we all just sort of build throughout, making mistakes or making, good decisions, things like that. Sometimes we'll just learn how to do this. But the question is, why don't we always use, these best practices to actually make those decisions and solve problems? And, there's a number of reasons for this. When it comes down to it, though, it's just that, we're humans, we're not computers, so we're not always going to behave in a rational way. It's not just going to be, this is the right answer. It's going to depend on some emotions and things like that as well. So that's what we're going to start by talking about today is, some different traits that might relate to bad gambles. So what I mean by that is I want you to just start off by thinking about this. Think of a real life, either risk or gamble or something, you have chosen to do that turned out to be, according to you, a mistake. Maybe you kind of lost something, you could call it a bad gamble. Think about this specific to yourself. And, if it was a risk you took, it could be, a friend, some sort of risk that they took, or, you could even think about something, bigger than yourself. Think about something like some risk that a government or a larger group of people took, and it ended up being kind of a bad gamble. So what were the main reasons that this gamble was taken in the first place? That's what I want you to kind of start out by thinking about. And I'll leave the screen up for a couple seconds, just so that, everybody can think through this a little bit for themselves. So again, it could be something that, you have dealt with, some gamble or risk that you took, one that a friend took, or a group of people. All right. So, why was that gamble taken in the first place? Why was it a bad gamble? That's what we're going to kind of look through next, is a couple examples of this. Excuse me. I do have a bit of a sore throat today. So, the first one here, I think this makes sense, especially for gamblers, that good odds does not guarantee a win. Even if you have really good odds, it comes down to luck, right? We're talking about taking risks. We're talking about gambling. There's no guarantees in this. So that means that, sometimes you can have bad luck, even if the odds are on your side. Even if you have like an 80% chance of winning, that still means that you've got a 1 in 5 chance of losing, right? So it comes down to luck ultimately. So I think this example, though, becomes kind of a scapegoat for a lot of things. Sometimes we'll just blame it on bad luck, when really it's some of these other things that we're going to be talking about here. So some other examples after, it's just bad luck, could be a lack of motivation, right? On our part, sometimes we're maybe too lazy, or we just don't have the motivation to kind of think the problem through as well as we should. Sometimes, we're not ready to devote that amount of time, and really make sure that we, are ready to make this decision. Excuse me. Another one is, again, lack of time, right? So we all have, busy lives. Sometimes there, at least according to us, there might not be enough time to think the problem through. We do have to kind of make a quick decision sometimes, even if it is a big decision. Sometimes we do have to do that in a short period of time. So, that can be a challenge as well. That can be a reason why we take a risk and it ends up being a bad gamble, is because we were rushed for time and we couldn't really think through everything, even if we wanted to, even if we had that motivation to, we just did not have the time to do that. Other times, we might be acting on impulse, right? So, for whatever reason, you have this risk or this opportunity given to you, this opportunity shown to you, and you just kind of decide to go for it without really thinking about those consequences, right? So, you're just kind of committed to going for it when, maybe that impulse is something that you should have held back on a little bit. For example, you can see in this picture, maybe this fish here did not think this jump through, right? They're trying to get to a bigger, space, a bigger area for them to live. And they're just kind of jumping for it in this picture, but maybe that's not the best decision to make. And really this next example ties into this too. So when it comes to, missing time or something like that as well, acting on impulse, part of this is another example of missing information, right? So sometimes we don't have all that information that we need to really make an educated decision, right? So this is something where, if we go back here, you can see this goldfish is just jumping for, that good space over there. What he doesn't see is it's actually a shark in this space as well. So this would definitely be a bad bet on his point, but he was missing that information, right? He maybe couldn't see that shark. So, that's the reason for this bad bet is because that fish was missing information. Some other things that are, important to not, forget, I guess, is outside pressure, right? So sometimes it could be, coming down to time, but it also could be coming down to peer pressure, right? So sometimes if you were alone, you would have made one decision. And if you're in a group of people, you make a different decision, right? So that's kind of what we're talking about here is when we're around certain people, they can influence us. It can be a positive thing. It can be a negative thing. So that's something to keep in mind too, whenever we're talking about making a, taking a risk, who is influencing us in this risk. Excuse me. And then we also might be biased, right? So it might come down to us as well. Sorry about that. Sometimes, we don't want to see both sides of things or all of the different sides to this decision, this risk. Sometimes we really want to just, pick something. We want it to go one way, and we just kind of make that decision based off that when we're kind of ignoring that information. Even if we have all the information we need, we might ignore it and we might be biased, and that might lead to a bad gamble as well. So how can we best handle, these barriers to good decision making? So what can we actually do? We've talked about, smart gambling last week, and we're talking about these barriers today, but how can we kind of put these together? How can we make sure that we are, doing our best to avoid those barriers or get around those barriers? The first thing we can do is making sure to put time and effort into all of especially our important decisions. So, this starts with getting all the information, getting all the facts. That's really the first thing you need to do before even, considering making your decision. You need information. You also will probably want to potentially delay making an important decision until you have, all those facts and you have enough time to think this through. If possible, you do want to make sure that you can push that off, make sure you have enough time to really think it through. And then when it comes to actually thinking it through, you want to brainstorm, those possible solutions. Think about as many possible solutions as you can, especially, what's most likely to happen, and then start to weigh pros and cons of each of those. So coming back to, time, right? So if we don't have time, if we have to make a quick decision, again, sometimes we'll have, a decision that is very important. It can have a big effect on our life. But for, whatever reason, we do have to make this quickly. what can we do in that sense, right? So, first off, you do want to kind of just assess what choice feels like the right one to make. So, you're kind of listening to your conscience here. You're really going with your gut feeling a little bit. But, you do want to make sure that you are still, as much as you can, thinking it through, thinking about those different solutions and things like that, different pros and cons to it as well. Okay, so then we also want to make sure that we can be objective, right? So as much as we can, we want to kind of weigh that evidence, weigh the facts, pros and cons, weigh all of those things as fairly as we can. It's easier said than done for sure. But, if you do not do this, if you are not objective or as objective as you can be, the main person at least that you'll be, kind of fooling or hurting is yourself. Excuse me. At least, when it comes to any decisions or potential risks, when it comes to our health, we're putting our own health at risk a lot of times. And, you can kind of blame it on not having enough time or other things like that, bad luck. But, maybe you were just biased and you kind of chose the wrong thing there. So you want to be as fair to yourself and to the decision as possible. Managing stress is also something to keep in mind here. So, thinking about, how you can manage your stress, stay focused on the goal, stay focused on the outcome, and, try to keep emotions out of this for the most part, as much as you can. A lot of this, some basic tips for managing your stress, socializing, talking things out with family or friends or people you care about, getting some exercise, whatever you like to do, being yourself, being positive, and then just kind of keeping busy with things that make you happy, right? So these are very, very basic things that we can do to try to manage our stress. Sometimes we need additional help there, and that's obviously an option as well. But this is something that you want to do whenever you're kind of thinking about some big important decisions as well. We need to make sure we're managing our stress. And then also resisting peer pressure. So this is a big piece of it as well. It's important to be assertive and, focus on what you think is right. It may not be the same thing that your friends think is right, but, it still could be the best decision for you. So, don't give in. You want to make sure that you are being assertive there and always remembering you're responsible for your own actions. But the actions that you take will also have consequences, right? So thinking that through too. If you are peer pressured into something, you potentially will be facing consequences, even if you didn't want to, take that action in the first place. And then this, I think, is an important question as well. So why are we better typically at solving other people's problems than our own, personal problems? And I'll tell you right off the bat here, it's not because my problems are any harder to solve than my friend's problems, right? That's not the case. What it is it's harder to be objective and unemotional when we're solving our own personal problems. We bring our emotions into it, and a lot of times that can make it harder to make a decision. Excuse me. So let's recap before we wrap up here a little bit. What can we do to limit these barriers? We talked about some barriers to good decision making today. Number one, first thing we can do is, make sure we're putting time and effort into all of our important decisions. Then we can be objective with those, try to be as fair as possible, manage our stress. That's something that's important as well, and resisting peer pressure. All right. So as usual, I do have some extra information, some extra resources here. So if you, want more information, or, you want help with recovery or treatment, or, learning more about gambling and some problems of gambling, you can reach out to any of these resources. They would be happy to help. There's a lot of great information with these different resources as well. And I'll leave this up for a couple more seconds. But with that, I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. And we'll see you next time with another Gambling Did You Know session.